Greetings, chess fans. This is FIDE Master Dennis Monokroussos, and we're now going to begin part 2 of our series on the quick Ruy Lopez, which is meant, of course, entirely ironically, not the Ruy Lopez part, but the quick part. This is going to cover the Schliemann, and in fact, we're not even going to get all the way through the Schliemann. We're just going to cover, well, we're going to cover most of it. What we'll look at is after e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop to b5, f5. So this is the Schliemann. Or, again, probably better labeled the Jaenisch, but I've been saying the Schliemann for so long that it's almost impossible for me to refer to it as the Jaenisch without really explicitly thinking about it. Anyway, we'll cover all the main moves here except for knight to c3. So we'll save that one for a second video. So this will take care of all the little sidelines plus d3. Although I should say that one of the sidelines is actually pretty important. Okay, so let's begin with e takes f5, and this is a kind of a cynical approach. It's bad, but, well, okay, it doesn't have to be cynical. I mean, someone might think that this is like a king's gambit, and you might as well accept it. But the problem here is that the knight, because white's knight is already on f3, e4 comes with tempo, and so this is a bit different than, let's say, the Falkbeer counter gambit in the regular king's gambit. So anyway, the idea, and one reason why I call this kind of a cynical approach is that some people play it hoping for a quick draw, generally against a higher rated player. With queen e2, queen e7. Okay, we don't want to move the knight away because knight to d4. And likewise here, if you retreat the knight, then black is just in great shape. Maybe queen to g5, for instance, could be played after knight to g1. So queen e2, queen e7, takes, pawn takes, and then knight to d4. And then the cynical drawing variation is just this. Black wants to regain this pawn, but he doesn't want to play c5, because if he plays c5, then knight to e6 is, well, let me show you this. Okay, so let's say c5, which is not really such a great move. Knight e6, takes, queen takes, and now the queen is loose here. So, well, also there's even queen to b5 check. I mean, this is actually pretty strong too. I mean, queen c6 would be horrible after white trades queens. I mean, black has 5 isolated pawns, 3 of which are tripled. So this is definitely not the way to go. Actually, I guess c5 would deserve a question mark then. That's pretty bad. But the other point is that I was making before is that there's also even just d3. And because the queen is unprotected, white can then pile up, play knight c3, and black can't play e takes d3 because the queen is hanging. So so c5 is not good. But after queen to e5, now if knight to e6, black can play bishop takes e6, f takes e6, and then not play queen takes e6, but play bishop to d6, protecting the queen. And that way, if d3, no big deal. We can just trade. And likewise, if knight c3, knight f6, d3, take on d3. And the e6 pawn will be rounded up. Black can castle queenside, put a rook on the e file, and get it back. But knight f3, this is the problem. This is the cynical point. If queen takes f5, d3, and again, because of the pin, the e4 pawn becomes vulnerable. So black's best is probably queen to e7, but then, hey, knight comes back, queen goes back, and away we go with a quick e-draw. So, fortunately, this is not the end of the story. Black can play on with knight to h6. And this seems to be perfectly all right. White doesn't seem to have anything great here. If he castles, then just knight takes f5, no big deal. If white tries to be principled, or greedy, however you prefer to put it, with the move g4, then after g6, this is just going to break up, and I think black is going to end up even maybe a bit better here. So we can say that e takes f5, while you should know about this knight h6 idea, this is, I think, quite handy. Once you know it, it takes the starch out of white's cheap drawing attempt, and then black is absolutely fine. Okay, so that's e takes f5 in a nutshell. Next useless line, queen e2. And it's not completely bad, but it's not really threatening either. White will win a pawn with this move, but black will have very good compensation. And I should say in general, if you're unhappy about sacrificing pawns, the Schliemann is not for you. And conversely, if you don't like with white, especially giving your opponent the initiative and then having to try to neutralize it, you you'll want to be very careful about the Schliemann, and you should look for maybe d3 would be the safest line, which we'll get to. Anyway, queen e2 is not so great. F takes e4, and now white has a choice between two ways of proceeding, both of which will win a pawn, but in both cases black will get good counterplay. So if queen takes e4, then knight f6, queen goes back, and here black probably should not bother trying to hold the pawn, but play something like bishop to c5, which the computer likes, and it's also recommended in a recent article in the New in Chess yearbook. So it seems to be fine. I mean, it's just mentioned in passing. I mean, this is very much a sideline. So after bishop takes c6, dc, queen e5 check, the bishop goes back, but no big deal. Castles for both sides, and this is quite a common situation. So white has picked up a pawn, but it's not easy for white to do anything with it. Black has two very good bishops, and the light squared bishop in particular is quite strong. And white's extra pawn is this f-pawn, and it's very, very difficult to see how this is going to become a meaningful factor anytime soon. And of course, black is going to continue with moves like bishop to d6, bishop maybe comes to g4, the queen sometimes swings over to the king side, and then black can double on the f-file or put the second rook on e8 with just perfect development and very, very good position. Okay, so queen takes e4 after queen e2. Fe4 doesn't lead anywhere. Okay, bishop takes c6 is basically the same sort of thing. D takes c6, queen takes e4. If knight e5, then I think just knight f6 is perfectly adequate. Also, queen d5 might be good too. So, queen takes e4, bishop d6, knight e5, knight f6, so we get this little free tempo here. Queen e2 and castles. And queen c4 check doesn't get anywhere after knight to d5, so we don't have to worry about sacrificing the exchange there. And again, black is just fine. So threatening to take on e5. Can also play maybe queen e7 or queen e8 next move. And again, black is just going to have very healthy development, the bishop pair, and an excellent game for the pawn. Okay, so queen e2 really is nothing special either. Third minor line is castles kingside. So fe4, bishop c6, dc, knight e5. And here, black could probably play knight f6, and that's okay, but the best move is queen to d4, after which black stands better. Now, first thing is, if the knight retreats, well, this is no big deal. We play h5, which looks funny, but it's actually quite a good move, because it takes away, well, it drives the knight back, and it takes away any queen h5 ideas. So after knight e3, notice that this plugs up the e-file, and also makes it harder for the bishop c1 to get into play. Black plays something like bishop to e6, prepares to castle queenside, and then the pawn being on h5 is not a factor at all. And black can develop very easily. Let's say castles, bishop comes to d6, the queen maybe comes to e5, especially if it's kicked, hitting h2. If white plays something like g3 in response to that, then there's h4, where there can also be knight f6, g4 ideas. So you can see that black's development is really going to be very easy, and it's hard to see what white's going to do with this congested queenside. And notice, I mean, white's not even up a pawn here, so it's not as if white has some compensation for his stulted development, lack of space, and black's bishop pair. Okay, so knight to g4 is not really encouraging, and if that's what white has to play in this variation, then there's no reason to play castles kingside on move 4. But people play this sometimes with the thought that they could play queen h5 check, but this is just a mistake. After g6, white should probably play something a bit sniveling like queen to g5, but after bishop to f5, black stands better. Or c3 and then queen d6, and again black stands better. White could play knight takes g6, but the problem is that after hg, the rook is protected by the queen on d4. And on queen takes g6 check, king to d8, white is just lost here. He only has 2 pawns for the piece, but his king is in serious trouble. Black's king is in no trouble at all. It's very easy for him to cover it up, but the h-file is going to be bad news. And all of black's minor pieces are either pointing there or will be very shortly. So d3, for example, bishop to d6, bishop g5 check, knight e7. Let's say g3 and then bishop to h3. And I mean, black just has everything in play. I mean, he can even follow up with king to d7 and bring the second rook into the act. So this is just absolutely horrible for white. So since this queen h5, g6, knight g6 line is bad, and the alternatives are just passive, 4 castles we can just throw into the scrap bin. You definitely shouldn't play that with white if you're facing the Schliemann. Okay, so now there are 3 moves that are very important to talk about. There's d4, which is a sacrificial line that's very sharp, and black really needs to know what he's doing. If he does know what he's doing, he's okay. I think white is scrambling for equality, but white does have to really know quite a bit to stay afloat. But I'm sorry, both sides have to know quite a bit in this line. So it's really a very, very dangerous and double-edged approach. There's the safest line, which is d3, and this I think is what will make you safety first guys happiest, and it's certainly not bad. And then finally there's knight to c3, which is the main line, probably the most principled approach, and that'll be the subject of our next video. So let's hit d4 here first. Okay, now after this, the only really good move, or the most principled move for black, is to just take on e4, then knight e5. I guess I should mention bishop c6, but this is just nothing. D takes c6. Actually, even b takes c6 can be played. So this is actually interesting as well. Going for the bigger center. So even though it makes a little bit harder to push the d pawn in the normal run of things, if the pawn sack is okay with d6, knight c6, then it can be played. So knight e5, knight f6 to stop queen h5 check. Let's say castles, and all right, I think black plays c5 here. You can also just play bishop to e7, and all of these moves are probably okay. And anyway, you can consider that. But d takes c6 is fine as well. And here, okay, knight takes c5. Again, knight f6. But actually, if I remember right, queen h4 is, or at least was preferred by theory, even over knight f6. So this is actually interesting too. Anyway, in both of these cases, black should be equal. So white's knight is good on e5. The pawn on e4 can sometimes be slightly weak, but black has the bishop pair and good development. The idea of queen h4, or one of the ideas, it's not that you're going to mate white on f2 or h2 when he castles, but rather it safeguards the e4 pawn a bit more, and you don't walk into any potential pins after knight f6, bishop g5. Okay, so that's a line that needs to be known a little bit too, but it's not terribly dangerous for black. Knight takes e5 is much more interesting. Okay, here I guess black could play knight f6, but white scores very well there. It's white just gets very easy play after knight to c3, if I recall correctly. So the right move here is just to take, and then play c6. Okay, now here's where the action starts to show up. And the point of this is that if the bishop retreats somewhere, let's say to a4, which is not a good retreat square, then black plays queen a5 check, say knight to c3, well, it's forced to protect the bishop, and then queen takes e5. And if white doesn't do anything really good here, and maybe there's nothing really good to do, black just plays knight f6, maybe bishop to c5, castle, and then d5, and with a tremendous position. I mean, an extra pawn, and it's a fantastic extra pawn at that. So if white doesn't find something really good really fast, I mean, it's just going to be, well, it's just going to be hopeless. But there is an interesting line here. Let me put an evaluation there. Well, 2 interesting lines. Bishop to e2 is actually more interesting than you might think. So queen a5 check, bishop d2, queen e5. But now white has, for instance, bishop to c3, or he could play, well, I'll explain in a minute. Bishop to c3, queen g5, and then bishop to h5 check. Or he can do it the other way around. He could play bishop h5 check first, because if g6, then bishop to c3. So the king has to move, then white castles, and or okay, again, we could do it without bishop to c, or we could do it with bishop to c3 thrown in as well. Either way, black has to be kind of careful. Let's say knight f6, bishop e2, d5, and even here it's not really so clear. I mean, white has a number of interesting moves. He could go for f3 or f4. If he plays f4 and black doesn't take, let's say he plays queen f5, then the bishop can come to e5, and then play c4, and the knight comes to c3 or d2, and there can be a lot of pressure against this black center. black doesn't really have the dark squares that well covered, and his king is still a bit exposed. So while I think black is objectively better here, white does have, I think, pretty decent practical compensation. I've seen decent players lose this with black, including myself. So I lost, I think, to Lapshin in a rapid game with this. I mean, I was okay for quite a while, but eventually the threats kept coming, and as time went down, he was able to get me. So he's a very good player and a very good attacking player, but it was very difficult to reach a position where it was just okay. I've solved the problems and it's done. So I was better, but white was able to keep threats coming, and it can be tricky. So certainly black shouldn't be afraid of this, but black also shouldn't consider the point in the bag either. Okay, so bishop to e2 is actually kind of interesting, but the main move here is knight to c3. So after this, black could try a couple of ways to avoid the main line, which is c takes b5, knight e4, d5, e takes d5, knight f6. And we'll look at this in a moment in some detail. But just to mention a couple of tries for black to avoid this. One kind of well-known approach is to play d5, and after e takes d6, to play knight f6. But white should be a little bit better here. I mean, the bishop goes back to c4, and I just think this is a bit comfortable for white. So he hasn't given up the bishop pair. The e4 pawn could be a tiny bit weak. Black is going to have to work a little bit to castle. So white's probably slightly more comfortable here. But it is a safer approach, to be sure. Not necessarily better, but safer. Another interesting move is queen to e7, which I hadn't seen before until I started researching for this show. And it's not played very much, but it is kind of interesting. The computer likes it at first. But the replies are actually quite just as interesting. So the point, of course, is that if the bishop retreats, then queen takes e5. But white could try some funny things. So bishop to f4 actually has been the most common move here, welcoming c takes b5 and then knight takes e4, and the knight's going to d6. And alternatively, white could even try castles. And I don't remember if this has been played, but the computer likes this one. And again, this could be pretty dangerous. Again, if c takes b5, knight takes e4, and we're back in the same mess. While if queen takes e5, I'm not sure if black can get away with or white can get away with knight takes e4. Probably not because of queen takes b5. But still, this looks incredibly risky. Probably just rook to e1. Yeah, so something like if queen takes e5, I mean this can't be right. Rook to e1, and okay, you can't take because of rook e4. And if you play d5, well, this doesn't defend, doesn't really help anything. I think white can just play probably just knight takes d5. Looks good because of cb, then bishop f4. And okay, this is all a disaster. Maybe knight f6 is okay though. Maybe you can play this way. Let's see. What can we do here? Yeah, maybe this isn't so bad. I guess you could play knight e4 and then bishop d3 and then f3 if need be. It's not really terribly inspiring, but maybe that's sufficient if nothing else. So let's take a very quick look at that. So of course he can't take because he loses his queen and knight to d6, and knight f6 isn't probably that bad either. So knight takes looks forced. Bishop to d3. Okay, and the threat of rook takes e4 compels d5. f3, but now, okay, bishop to d6 or even bishop c5 check first, and then on, well, if king h1, then bishop to d6 is even stronger. Well, still just g3. I don't know, so this doesn't look that impressive to me, so maybe queen takes e5 can be played, or there's going to be some really neat violent trick with knight takes e4 that I'm not seeing at the moment. Well, let me try this. Knight e4, queen takes b5, well, not c takes b. Well, maybe even cb, and then rook e1. But okay, but queen takes b5 was the idea. And then rook e1, and neither block works because of knight to d6 anyway. But maybe king f7, I don't know. Does white really have full compensation here? It's scary, but something like this should be okay for black. Maybe h4. Okay. Anyway, very interesting stuff here. So this you can explore further. I have no idea what's going on there, but it's certainly dangerous for both sides, and you need to have a long think there, or you need to spend some time with your computer beforehand if you want to play Queen E7. Okay, so anyway, to the main line. C takes B5, knight E4, D5, E takes D6, knight F6, and here white has at least three moves, really three moves that are pretty common here. Bishop to G5, pinning the knight, Queen to D4, protecting the knight and centralizing, and maybe threatening Queen E5 check, and simply castling kingside. Okay, well let's start with Queen to D4. On this, black should just take, Queen takes, King F7, Queen D5 check is the main move here. And you're going to feel tempted to play Bishop to E6, but after Queen takes B7 check, you haven't really made progress. Queen D7 hangs the rook. White should take it. So the best move here is actually King to G6, which looks a bit frightening, but there's nothing really for white to do to exploit this. Probably white's best move is Bishop to F4 to keep this advanced pawn on D6 and try to castle, and then black should play Queen to E8, and then Queen to C6. And okay, white has a couple of pawns. The pawn on D6 is a very important pawn, and the black king is momentarily exposed. It's not that it's in danger, but sooner or later black will have to spend some time bringing it back, and so white has at least some practical chances here, but I think black is objectively better. Okay, one other move. Instead of Queen to D5 check, there's also Bishop to F4, and now you don't want to play Bishop takes D6 because you're walking into Queen D5 check, and all kinds of difficulties arise then. But Queen to E8. Okay, Bishop to E5, and now, again, not Bishop takes D6 because of Queen to D5 check, but Queen to C6, and again, black is better. Very similar to the last line we looked at. So, I think Queen to D4 is not really so serious. You just trade knights, play King F7, and then remember to play King to G6 after Queen to D5, and you'll be fine. Okay, line 2. White castles. Okay, well, again, we just grab this knight. This is, it's safe, and, well, it's as safe as anything else is going to be. So we at least get rid of some of white's attacking potential. So Queen H5 check, G6, Queen E5 check, King F7, and now, okay, Queen takes E4 would just be nothing. Then you can play Bishop to E6, or maybe just Bishop takes D6. But the principal move here is Queen takes H8. And now Knight F6. And I think black is doing fine here. I don't think he's better. He scores pretty well here, but I think with Bishop to H6, white can probably maintain equality, but nothing more than that. Okay, so let's see. Yeah, castles, as I said, is not really very dangerous. You just take the knight, and you feel free to give up the rook and then play Knight F6. So Bishop to G5 is, I think, the toughest line and the trickiest one. Now here, black needs to remember to play Queen A5 check, first of all, and then play B4 next. Well, unless Queen to D2 happens, and then, or some ridiculous move like C3, and then you take the knight. Queen D2, of course, you trade queens. But on the reasonable moves, knight to C3 and bishop to D2, you play B4. Okay, so let's start with bishop to D2, which isn't so good. Here, B4. Takes, castles. And the nice thing, the reason why B4 is important, I should stop and note that, is that after takes and takes, there's no Queen H5 check because your queen is covering the 5th rank. So that's part of why it's so important. And also you may come to E5. This may be a useful square too. So castles avoids any Queen to E5 worries, that's for sure. Bishop takes D6. Bishop H6, believe it or not, to prevent castling. And now bishop to C7, so we defend the bishop, which was attacked last move. Rook E1 check, King F7, Queen D3 for instance, and now just Queen to C5 covering the C4 square, and black is just fine. So bishop to F5 is coming next, and it's hard to see what white really has at this point. So again, black has to be careful. His king is sitting on F7, and there aren't a lot of guys around it, but white doesn't have really enough attacking potential left either. So black, objectively speaking, is winning at this point. So bishop to D2 here is not the most testing move. Knight to C3 is. Okay, well, as I mentioned, the threat is bishop takes f6, followed by queen h5 check. So b4 takes care of that by defending h5. Takes, and now, well, knight to d5. And now it looks all of a sudden like this might be very, very bad for black. I mean, white has 2 pawns for the piece. Black has almost no development. Knight to c7 check is threatened. Knight takes f6 may be a threat. Queen h5 check might be a threat. What does black do? Well, we start with the move b3 check. Okay, c3, and now bishop to e6. And, okay, so first of all, this neutralizes queen h5 because of just king to d8. Yeah, you can't play bishop to f7 because then the knight checks and queen takes queen. But queen h5 check, king d8 is perfectly okay for black. And white has walked himself into a pin then. So that would be great for black. Yeah, let me just, in case you're not seeing it, king over, and this pin is rather inconvenient for white, to put it mildly. So queen h5, I think, is just a bad move. But knight to c7 check. Okay, this is clearly the key. Knight f6 would be nothing after king f7, but knight c7 is right. So now king to d7, and here white should probably not take the rook straight away because of queen to e5 check. And after king f1, bishop takes d6, and white's up a lot of material at the moment, but it's disappearing next move with rook takes a8. Black's bishops are very, very good. The white king is clumsy on f1. White's h1 rook is not participating at all. The other rook will because of a takes b3, but this position is overall definitely significantly better for black. So white should be patient and just castle. And black probably should not move the rook away at this point. If he moves the rook, then a takes b3, hitting the queen, and then maybe knight takes e6, rook a7. And definite compensation and counterplay here, where knight takes e6 first, after the rook moves, then rook checks, then a takes b3, or even queen takes b3 check. A lot of good ideas. The point is, don't move the rook. Play bishop takes d6. All right, now, if knight takes a8 here, b takes a2 is very good for black. So this pawn is quite strong. The knight is trapped on a8 anyway. So there's no rush, and this is going to be terrific for black. Extra material, dominating bishops, and well, just the better position all around. So knight takes e6. This is the right move. And now we don't take straight away, but we play this Zwischenzug queen e5. If king takes, then again we're walking into queen takes b3 check, or maybe rook to e1, or maybe both. So queen e5 is very good. And in fact, here white should play rook to e1. Of course, he has to stop the mate, and this saves the knight. Queen h2 check, king f1, queen h1 check, king e2, queen takes g2, queen takes b3, rook a to e8, preparing to kind of artificially castle here. King d3 to save the knight, king c8, and this position has actually occurred more than once in tournament play, so at least twice, including at a pretty high level. So it looks as if it's roughly equal, but probably black is maybe a touch better here. I think his bishop may end up being better than the knight. Certainly, if we reach an endgame, black is going to be in great shape with that passed h-pawn and the bishop versus knight imbalance. Neither king is completely safe, but the black king is basically okay at this point. So, you know, it's playable for white, but I think black is all right. Okay, so that's all I want to say about d4. As you can see, it's very, very sharp. Black has to steer clear of quite a number of difficulties, but if he knows what the dangers are, and doesn't mind being under an attack, is willing to grab the material, calculate, and defend, then I think objectively speaking, black is at least equal. Okay, so we have one more move to look at today, and then we'll look at knight to c3 next show. But now d3. Okay, f takes e4, d takes e4, knight f6. Here, this looks like this should be just great for black, right? So black is developing very naturally. He didn't have to sacrifice a pawn. He's going to put the bishop on c5, castle, play d6, and have this kind of ideal-looking setup. The problem is that it takes him a little while to achieve this, and white can obtain some real pressure while black is setting up everything. Now, one thing for white, you should avoid knight to c3 because after bishop to b4, black is completely fine. So we'll take on c3, play d6, castle, no problems. So the right move is to castle. And now black should, well, black could play d6. It's a very passive line. White's slightly better, but it's a safe line in the sense that it avoids complications and a lot of tricky variations. But objectively, it just gives white the advantage. Okay, so bishop to c5. This is the principled move. And now there are three moves for white, although two of them really come to the same thing. So queen to e2 and queen to d3 are going to transpose. White's going to play queen to c4 next in either case. Okay, so let's get to those. But first we'll talk about another sideline with knight to c3. Okay, so after knight to c3, d6, protecting the pawn. Here, okay, if queen to d3 castles, white can win a pawn with bishop takes and then knight takes e5. But this is actually not any good. After queen to e8, knight f3, a5, black has terrific compensation. So the bishop can come to a6, there's pressure against e4, the f-file and the bishop on c5 all work together very nicely to give black an excellent game. So after knight to c3, d6, instead bishop to g5 is the independent line. Castles, and this just turns into what we looked at in the show I did a few weeks ago on my Downers Grove tournament. So just to give a very quick recap, knight to d5, and then here it's important to remember to play king h8. So the rook can jump on the g-file when white takes on f6. So knight h4, knight to d4, bishop c4, b5 to drive the bishop off of the diagonal hitting g8, bishop d3, now c6 protecting the b5 pawn and forcing the issue with the knight. Here you may recall my opponent played b4, which didn't work out very well. Black was just better there. You can check out that show for the details, or of course just analyze it for yourself with or without a computer, but black is just much better after b4. So the two responsible moves, or the two good moves here, are either capture on f6. So bishop f6, g takes f6, knight e3, and rook to g8. So white's got a good grip on the f5 square, especially after he plays c3, and then maybe queen f6. On the other hand, black has the g-file, has this nice pawn mass, and has the bishop pair. So it's an interesting, roughly equal position. Alternatively, knight takes f6 is playable too. G takes f6, bishop e3. So here white keeps his bishops and tries to neutralize that dark squared bishop. Rook to g8, king h1, rook g4, just to induce g3, and then the rook goes back so the bishop can go to g4 or to h3. And this too is roughly equal. Interestingly, this line's been known for actually a long time. I mean, well over a decade, maybe a couple of decades or more. And it would be interesting to see this get tested nowadays. So I think it's still a viable line and something that white could try, but it isn't tested very often. Anyway, in either of these cases, black is roughly equal, but definitely it's interesting and complicated play with a lot of imbalances. All right, so let's go back though, and instead of knight to c3, let's look at the queen e2 or queen d3 complex instead. So this became very popular around the turn of the century, and black has to be very accurate here to avoid some tricky or to avoid some serious problems. So we start with d6. Okay, queen c4. This prevents castling, and there are some interesting ideas with b4 and with knight takes e5, taking advantage of the loose bishop on c5 and problems with c6 as well. So queen to e7 takes care of all of that, protects e5, c5, and so on, and prepares bishop to e6 in some cases. Well, knight to c3. And now bishop to e6 wouldn't be very good. It just walks in a knight to d5. So here the move is bishop to d7. Now, the right move here is knight to d5, but you might think, well, why not just soup it up with bishop to g5? Since bishop to e6 is no good because of knight to d5 anyway, or h6, knight to d5. I mean, this might look just crushing at first glance. But black has a way out that just saves the day. Very important. If you don't find this move or don't know about it, you could just get killed here. but a6. This is the key move. This saves the day. So now if knight to d5, this would just be a blunder, because you can play a takes b5, and it's just game over, free piece. So bishop takes c6 instead. If bishop to a4, then you can play b5. You just keep going. So bishop c6, b takes c6. Now d5 is covered. White has lost his great bishop, and black has no problems here at all. Black might even be a little bit better. So knight to d5 is the move here. And now we have a long exchanging sequence. Knight takes d5, e takes d5, knight to d4, bishop takes d7 check, queen takes d7, and now we come to another key moment. So here white has a choice between two very, very different approaches. There's the crazy approach with knight takes e5. So this leads to just unbelievably sharp play. And then there's the quiet approach with knight takes d4. And this is probably what, again, the safety first of you will want to choose. And objectively, it's not bad at all either. So this is not a bad choice. Just pointing out that it is a safer approach. Okay, so knight takes e5. Let's start with this. Queen f5. Knight to d3. And now castle's queenside. So white's up a pawn here, but black's pieces are all starting to kind of point evilly towards the white king. So we just need to play rook d to e8, rook h to f8, and maybe drop the bishop back to b6 if we get everything we want. And bad things are going to start to happen to white. So white is going to have to play actively too. Now, three moves here. I'll just mention two of them quickly since they're not very testing. One is the obvious greedy move, knight takes c5. So takes, excuse me, and now knight takes c2. And here it seems the only move that even equalizes for white is bishop to f4. And then this just liquidates. So takes, rook d5, and this is simply equal. It's almost kind of symmetrical. All right. Another try for white is to play king h1, is getting the king out of the way of checks on f2, on f3 or e2, and on the diagonal. But now, okay, after something like just b5 and queen takes d5, which actually occurred in a game, black is equal. I think white ended up winning that game, but not because of this position at all. Okay, finally, a4, and this is the toughest move. This was played in a game between Mehmedjarov and Rajabov back in 2008, and it was an extremely well played draw. All right, so let's see a little bit more of that game. Rook h to e8, king h1, g5, and here the move in the game was bishop to e3. And after this, black played the very nice shot knight f3. So if takes, then queen f3 and rook e4 is great for black. So Mehmedjarov played knight takes c5, d takes c5. Again, taking meets the same response. So rook f to d1, rook e4, queen f1. So he's got to be careful here. I mean, there are ideas like, well, if queen takes c5, rook h4, and on h3 you play rook takes h3 and it's mating. So the queen goes to f1, so if rook h4, well, probably just take the knight, but I mean, you'd also have h3 with safety. So now the knight retreats to d4, queen d3, queen e5, and here we can say that black has sufficient compensation for the pawn, which may be regained sooner or later on d5, although you got to watch out for c3 tricks. Anyway, the game was drawn a few moves later. There were alternatives along the way, but I'll just very quickly scroll through the moves so you can see them. Bishop g5, rook e8, bishop to d2, rook h4, threatening mate, h3, queen takes d5. So there's, the queen can't move away because of rook takes h3 possibilities. And if c3, then c4. So white can't win the knight by the pin. So c4, queen c6, queen g3, knight f5, and then they repeated. So a very well played game, and it looks like this draw seems to represent best play for both sides, maybe even all the way from knight takes e5. Oh, a couple of sidelines, so I mentioned them, but I didn't show them. So after a4, rook h to e8, king h1, g5. Okay, Mehmedjarov played bishop to e3. A couple of other alternatives. b4 is one, And against this, black has to react very quickly with rook to e4. So if, for instance, now f3, just to show one kind of interesting line. On f3, then knight takes f3, queen to b3, rook e2. The threat here, by the way, I think is queen to h3, because if you take the queen, then rook takes h2 as mate, and the threat is queen takes g2 as well as queen takes h2 mate. So rook f3, queen g4, threatening mate on g2, and after rook to g3, Brunello, in his book Attacking the Spanish, shows a very nice variation here. Rook to e1 check. It's hard to believe this move at first, but after queen to e2, there doesn't seem to be any way for white to avert mate. The threat, of course, is queen f1. So h4, check, 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 and then we take this one, and then after rook to f8, it's mate in at most 4 moves. So you got to be ultra careful. Back after rook to e4, the best move for white is knight takes c5. Okay, so after knight c5, d takes c5, queen c5, rook to d5, queen a7, knight c2. White has to scramble here to save the draw. So yeah, he's up a pawn, but look at the beautifully centralized black pieces. So here's how, again, this is a Brunello variation. Here's how it goes. Rook to b1, rook e1. Takes, takes, bishop takes g5, queen takes b1, check, 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 check again, and finally perpetual check. And just in time, because I mean knight f3 mate or mating is threatened, so white has to force the perpetual or he just loses. Okay, so that is a little bit of knight takes e5 theory. As you can see, it's very, very sharp. It seems that black is equal, that white has no advantage whatsoever. But again, with black, you either have to be a calculating machine or extremely well prepared. Okay, with knight takes d4, here it's much more positionally oriented. So safety for both sides. Bishop takes d4, a4. Now, the idea is to just trap the bishop with c3 and then a5, or b4 and a5. So black should play a6. Don't play a5. So a5, I think, is a mistake. After bishop to e3, takes, takes. Black normally castles queenside in this line since he can't castle kingside. But after b4, the lines are opening here, and this is a bit dodgy for black, as the British like to say. So a6, this is the move. Bishop e3, takes, takes, castles, and from here, this is kind of the tabia of the variation with d3, the modern tabia. White has tried 3 moves here, and it seems as if rook to f2 is the best of the 3. So the alternatives are rook to f3, which at first glance seems like it would be better. I mean, you have maybe more options with the rook. And the third possibility is b4, which was the original move proposed in this variation. But it seems that after b4, white really can't open up the lines on the queen side, or at least can't open them up fast enough to achieve anything. So black just plays rook h to f8, and let's say if b5, a5, b6, black can just trade and play king to b8, or play king to b8 immediately. And black is just holding on, but just is good enough. So, for instance, if white trades twice on c7 and plays rook to f7 check, black just plays rook to d7, all of his pawns are safe, and indeed, white is in trouble there because the black king can start heading for the white pawns on the queen side, which are all kind of weak. So this line doesn't promise white any advantage. This move b4 is the problem is it just lets black have his equal share of the f-file, and then white really doesn't have enough on the queen side to do anything. Okay, so rook to f3. This is try number 2. Rook d to f8, rook a to f1, takes and takes, king to b8. And now, okay, white wants to bring his queen to a square like f1, so he wins the f-file, but first he has to protect the a-pawn. So b3. But now the problem is this. Queen to e7, queen f1, so now he's ready to play rook to f7. But black gets e4 in, and he gets it with tempo. So this is good enough for black to equalize. Rook f4, queen e5, and black is just fine. The queen is great on e5, hitting the pawn on d5, protecting the pawns on e4 and g7, and of course grabbing the very nice diagonal from a1 to h8. So the third option seems to be best. Rook to f2. And white maybe has a very, very small edge, but it hasn't proved enough to win. So rook d to f8, rook a to f1, queen e7, queen e4. Okay, so threatening to take twice on f8 and then grab the h-pawn. So g6, rook f3. So of course this is what white was trying to avoid wasting time on earlier, but this really doesn't get anywhere anyway. King to b8. So the king gets to safety. There's no queen g4 check ideas to worry about. And, all right, so now b3, solidifying the structure. Rook takes f3. Queen takes f3. Otherwise, black plays rook f8 and is completely equal. Okay, queen to g5, hitting the pawn on e3, so the white queen is at least stuck at home for the moment. Okay, h3 takes care of the back rank. Rook c8. Gets the rook safe, and also has ideas of c6 potentially in some situations. King h2, queen h4, c4 to stop ideas like queen to b4 in some cases, and now a5, and here the position is really just very much, it's just very, very solid for black. So this occurred in a game, Carlsen against Radjabov in the Morelia/Linares tournament back in 2008. I don't remember if it was played in the Morelia half or the Linares half, but speaking of halves, the game ended up half-half. So they drew. Carlsen tried for another 41 moves to get something, but yeah, he never got close to winning. So white is, again, slightly more comfortable because of his control over the f-file, but black's position, as you can see, is just very, very solid. If the white queen goes on any exploratory missions, well, the white queenside pawns, well, all of white's pawns from a4 to e4 are potentially vulnerable. So this looks like the state of the art in the let's say the solid line with d3 and then 13 knight takes d4, as opposed to that crazy pawn grab with knight takes e5. So black is holding on here. I mean, black's not going to win these positions unless white goes just insane, but white's really not winning this either. Okay, so you are now up to date on, I think, the vast majority of significant Schliemann/Jaenisch theory, other than in the lines with the move 4 knight to c3, and that's what we're going to get to next time. So next time, the classical main line, which is still very important today. All right, so I'll see you next time, and good luck. If you try the Schliemann and you have some successes with it, and this helped, let me know. All right, take care. See you next time. Bye-bye.